Paris, 1794. The sky hangs low and gray, as if the city itself has grown tired of watching people die. The streets reek of damp cobblestone and fear. From the windows, whispers slip out like ghosts, each one speaking the same name: Jean-Luc Moreau. His speeches had dared to question the bloodlust of the revolution, to suggest that perhaps liberty had begun devouring its own children. But in the year of terror, truth was treason, and pity was a crime. He can hear the crowds gathering outside, chanting for the guillotine to sing again. The rhythm of their stomping feet sounds almost like drums of war. They told him last night that his time had come, that at dawn he would meet the national razor. He thought he was ready. Death, he told himself, was at least a clean end. A single flash, a moment of pain, and then silence. He had seen the guillotine before. In the square, its blade shimmered like a promise of mercy. He remembered thinking that of all the ways men kill, this one seemed almost kind. But as dawn creeps through the cracks of his cell, he feels a wrongness in the air. Too quiet, too slow. The guard does not come with the priest or the escort. He comes alone, face pale, voice trembling. He avoids Jean-Luc's eyes. "Not the square," he mutters. "You've been ordered elsewhere." Jean-Luc's stomach tightens. "Elsewhere?" he repeats. "Why?" The guard doesn't answer. He just nods to the door. Chains rattle as two soldiers seize him by the arms. They do not lead him toward the light that spills from the courtyard, where he expects to see the cart waiting to take him to his death. Instead, they march him down a narrow corridor, damp and dark, where the smell of rot grows heavier with every step. He tries to speak, but his throat is dry, and the sound that escapes is closer to a croak than a question. The guards ignore him. They reach an iron door he's never seen before, half hidden behind barrels and broken crates. One soldier knocks. A pause. Then a low scraping sound as a bolt slides free from the inside. When the door opens, he sees not another guard, but a man in a long leather coat, wearing a mask over his mouth. Behind him, the faint glow of oil lamps flickers down a staircase that seems to descend forever. The masked man doesn't introduce himself. "Jean-Luc Moreau, by order of the Committee of Public Safety, you are to be delivered for the special sentence." "Special?" Jean-Luc whispers. The man tilts his head slightly, almost pitying him. Something cold grips Jean-Luc's spine. He turns toward the guards, searching for any sign of mercy, but their faces are carved from stone. One pushes him forward. The stairs are slick, carved into ancient limestone. Water drips steadily from above, echoing like the ticking of a clock. His bare feet slide on the mossy steps as they descend deeper, beneath the prisons, beneath the sewers, beneath even the bones of Paris itself. The air grows colder, thicker, heavy with something he can't quite name. He starts to notice faint marks on the walls, names scratched into the stone by fingernails, some so fresh they still bleed. He recognizes one. He feels his breath quicken. "Where are we going?" he demands. The masked man's voice is almost gentle. They reach a final landing. The smell here is unbearable: rot, sweat, iron, and something sweetly decayed. The corridor ahead is lit by a single lantern swinging from a rusted hook. In its dim light, Jean-Luc sees doors on either side, iron-barred, small, with holes at eye level. From inside, faint breaths. A whisper. Then silence. A face stares back at him. Eyes open wide, lips sewn together with black thread. The eyes move, pleading. Alive. Jean-Luc stumbles back, gasping. At the end of the corridor waits a door thicker than any before, lined with chains. The masked man produces a key and opens it. Inside, a single chair sits in the center of the room, wooden, reinforced with straps of iron. Beneath it, dark stains that are not yet dry. The masked man gestures. "Sit. You spoke against eternity. You believed the blade would end you, but the Republic has found a better lesson." Two guards force him down into the chair. The iron is cold against his skin. Straps bite into his wrists and ankles. He struggles, but his strength is gone. The masked man produces a vial of clear liquid that glows faintly in the lamplight. "For the people," the man murmurs, and plunges the needle into Jean-Luc's neck. Fire rushes through his veins. His breath catches halfway in his throat. He tries to scream, but no sound comes. His vision blurs, then sharpens again. He can still see. The masked man watches him closely, eyes gleaming through the lamplight. "Good," he whispers. The mind remains. He leans close, so close that Jean-Luc can smell the oil and decay on his breath. "Welcome," he says softly, "to the punishment worse than the guillotine." And as the lights dim and footsteps fade beyond the iron door, Jean-Luc realizes the horror. He is not dead, not dying, just trapped, inside his own still body, waiting for whatever comes next. The faint dripping of water becomes the only sound in the dark. Each drop lands like the ticking of a clock that will never stop. The room smells of ink and candle wax, that peculiar scent of authority and decay. Shadows coil around the edges of the chamber like living things, moving with the flicker of each flame. Behind a massive oak desk sits a man whose face has become legend and terror all at once, Maximilien Robespierre. His eyes gleam with the conviction of a prophet, but there's something hollow behind them, something that hums like a secret no one dares to name. He does not look up as another figure enters. The man is dressed in a physician's coat stained with brownish blotches, blood perhaps, though no one would ask. A mask covers the lower half of his face, hiding the thin smile that seems to twitch beneath it. He stands silently, waiting. Robespierre dips his quill in ink, scratches a few more words onto parchment, and finally speaks without raising his gaze. "You saw him?" "Yes," the doctor replies. "The nobleman, still breathing, still arrogant." The quill stops mid-stroke. "Arrogant," Robespierre repeats softly, as though tasting the word. "Arrogance is the disease of monarchs. It infects the mind, clouds reason, and yet he believes himself innocent." "He does," the doctor answers. "He asked for the guillotine as though death were a right." A cold smile flickers across Robespierre's lips. How merciful the guillotine has become. They have made it a symbol of justice, quick, clean, honorable. But what of those whose crimes cannot be cleansed by blood alone? What of those who corrupted with words? Finally, he raises his head. His eyes catch the candlelight like shards of glass. Such men must be made to understand their crimes. They must see what they have done until they wish for death and find it absent. The doctor shifts slightly, the faintest tremor in his hand betraying unease. "You mean the new method? It is untested. The process might fail?" Robespierre interrupts, voice sharpening. "Everything we build here is untested. Liberty was untested. Equality was untested. And yet, here we stand." He pushes back his chair, rising slowly. His footsteps echo in the small room as he crosses to a wooden box resting in the corner. Inside, beneath a black cloth, lies a metal device. Small, intricate, filled with tubes and glass. The doctor watches as Robespierre lifts it carefully, admiration gleaming in his eyes. "Doctor," he says quietly, "you called it suspension of consciousness, yes? A way to keep the mind awake while the body sleeps?" The doctor nods. "In principle. The serum halts muscular function. The subject cannot move, but his senses remain active. It was designed for surgical purposes, a state of living paralysis." Robespierre's voice lowers to a whisper. "Then it is not paralysis. It is punishment. The body still breathes, but the soul cannot flee." The doctor hesitates. "You would use it as judgment?" Robespierre turns toward him fully now, and for a moment there is something almost divine in his expression. The calm certainty of a man convinced that cruelty can be holy. "The guillotine ends pain. But revolution is not about mercy. It is about memory. Let him remember every moment. Let him live in the stillness between life and death, until even his thoughts beg for silence." He places the device back into the box, shuts it softly, and seals it with a wax stamp bearing the mark of the Republic, the scales of justice. "Prepare the serum," he says. "Tonight, he will receive the punishment of consciousness." The doctor nods, but his eyes flick toward the shadowed corner of the room where other documents lie piled, all marked classified, all bearing the same wax seal. He swallows hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "And if the mind does not break?" Robespierre steps closer, the flickering candlelight tracing sharp lines across his gaunt face. "Then he will serve us longer," he murmurs. An eternal reminder that the revolution is merciful only to the dead. A gust of wind from an unseen crack in the wall makes the candles tremble. The shadows twist and elongate, crawling across the floor like black serpents. Robespierre returns to his desk, dips the quill again, and begins to write. Each stroke of the pen is deliberate, final, as though the act itself were an execution. The doctor stands still, unsure whether to bow or flee. But before he can move, Robespierre speaks once more. "When you finish," he says, eyes still on the parchment, "burn his records. No one must know his name. The punishment is not for Jean-Luc Moreau. It is for the idea that he carried." The doctor nods stiffly and leaves the chamber, clutching the box to his chest. The heavy door creaks shut behind him, sealing the room in silence once again. Robespierre sits alone in the candlelight. The ink dries on his paper like blood seeping into cloth. He reads the words he has just written, almost reverently. "The soul may outlive the blade." And as the candle sputters, he whispers to no one in particular, perhaps to God, perhaps to the ghosts of the revolution. "Let him die without dying." Outside, Paris sleeps beneath a shroud of fog. In the cellars below, men sharpen blades that will never fall. And somewhere in the dark, a doctor begins to mix a clear, trembling liquid that glows faintly in the lamplight, the beginning of a punishment the world was never meant to see. The air thickens with every step they take. Jean-Luc can no longer tell how long he has been walking. Minutes, hours, perhaps days. Down here, time is meaningless. The torch carried by the guard ahead spits and cracks, its light barely reaching the damp walls that seem to close in around them. The sound of their boots echoes endlessly, swallowed by the weight of the earth pressing from above. He tries to speak, to ask where they are going, but his throat feels as though it's been stuffed with ash. The guards ignore his attempts, dragging him by the chains that dig deeper into his wrists. The tunnel slopes downward, twisting like the spine of some buried beast. Water drips from the ceiling, splashing onto his face. It's cold, metallic, and carries the faint taste of rot. In the flickering light, he begins to notice shapes carved into the limestone, letters, words, dates. At first they seem random, but then he realizes they are names. Dozens, hundreds. Each name carved by desperate hands, some crudely scratched, others traced with eerie precision. Some bear crosses beside them, others symbols he doesn't recognize. Circles, triangles, marks that look like eyes. He runs his fingers over one of them as he's pulled along. The letters are uneven, trembling, as though carved in fear. He whispers it under his breath. "Edouard Beaumont." His heart stutters. He knows that name. A poet. A friend. A man who vanished months ago after speaking too loudly against the new order. He stares at the carving, realization tightening around his chest like a vice. He's not the first to come this way, and he will not be the last. The tunnel widens suddenly, opening into a cavernous chamber. The walls are lined with skulls stacked neatly like bricks, the hollow sockets watching silently as they pass. Bones crunch underfoot, old, brittle, and countless. The air is heavier here, thick with the smell of death and damp earth. The guards push him forward into another passage. This one is narrower, the ceiling low enough that he has to stoop. The torchlight flickers, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. For a moment, one of the shadows doesn't move with the torch. Jean-Luc freezes. He turns his head slowly, his eyes adjusting to the dim. There, at the edge of the light, something moves. A figure crouched against the wall, trembling. Another next to it, then another. They are prisoners. Dozens of them, half naked, their skin pale and slick with sweat. Chains clatter softly as they shift. Their eyes glint in the dark, wide, hollow, filled with a silence that feels heavier than screams. One of the prisoners crawls toward him, dragging chains that rasp across the stone. As the torchlight hits his face, Jean-Luc's breath catches in his throat. The man's lips are sewn shut with black thread, crude stitches, uneven and inflamed. The prisoner reaches a trembling hand toward him, pointing weakly at the floor. Jean-Luc looks down. The man drags a finger through the dirt, slow and deliberate, forming letters. They make you watch yourself die. Before Jean-Luc can respond, a guard steps forward and kicks the man backward. The prisoner collapses with a muffled groan, his stitched mouth leaking a thin line of blood. Another guard laughs, low, cruel, and jerks Jean-Luc forward by the chain. The message remains in the dirt for a heartbeat longer before another boot smears it into nothing. They continue down the tunnel, deeper and deeper, until the air feels too thick to breathe. The walls are slick with moisture, the stones sweating like living flesh. Somewhere behind him, one of the prisoners begins to hum, a soft, broken tune that sounds almost like a lullaby. It echoes off the stone and follows them into the dark. The path narrows again, and soon they're crawling. The torch barely fits through the opening. The smell is unbearable now, a mix of mildew, rot, and something faintly sweet like spoiled fruit. Jean-Luc's knees scrape against the rock. His breath comes in short, panicked bursts. He feels the walls brushing his shoulders, his back, his face. Then, just as he begins to think the tunnel will crush him entirely, it opens once more, into a chamber vast and circular. There are no bones here, no markings, only silence. At the center stands a single wooden chair, bolted to the ground. Chains hang from its arms like veins. A pool of dark liquid spreads beneath it, old and sticky. A single lantern swings from the ceiling, its light casting the illusion of movement on the walls, like figures dancing or writhing. Jean-Luc's knees tremble. He knows instinctively that this is where he will be left. The masked man from before is waiting in the shadows. His voice is calm, almost kind. "Welcome to the quiet part of Paris, monsieur." Jean-Luc's gaze darts around the chamber, searching for an escape that doesn't exist. "What is this place?" he rasps. The man steps closer, the light catching the mask's cold glint. "A place the revolution forgot," he says softly. "Where names fade and men become ideas again." He gestures toward the chair. "Sit and be remembered in silence." Jean-Luc shakes his head, backing away. "You can't—" But the guards are already behind him, their hands like iron. The chains clatter as they seize him once more, and as they drag him toward the waiting chair, he realizes that the air has changed. It no longer smells of death. It smells of medicine. He remembers the doctor's trembling hands, the vial glowing in the lamplight. He knows now that this is no prison. This is a laboratory, and whatever waits here will not end with death. The last thing he sees before they force him down is the writing carved faintly into the wall above the chair, almost erased by time. A name, Edouard Beaumont. And below it, 3 words scratched in shaking letters, "Still awake, always." The doctor's footsteps echo like slow, deliberate heartbeats against the stone floor. Jean-Luc sits shackled to the wooden chair, his wrists raw where the iron digs into flesh. The air is thick with the smell of oil, burnt metal, and something faintly chemical, sharp enough to sting the back of his throat. The masked man stands before him, adjusting a small glass vial in his gloved hands. The liquid inside is colorless, yet when it catches the lamplight, it glimmers faintly, like something alive. Jean-Luc watches, breath trembling, as the doctor places the vial into a metal syringe. His voice, when he finally speaks, is eerily calm. The voice of a man describing anatomy, not cruelty. "Do you know what mercy truly is, Monsieur Moreau?" Jean-Luc doesn't answer. His lips tremble, but his throat produces no sound. The doctor tilts his head slightly, as though studying him. "Mercy," he continues, is the swift separation of mind from body. Death is kind because it ends perception, pain, memory, guilt. He steps closer. The tip of the needle gleams. But what if mercy is withheld? He whispers. What if we remove only the freedom of the body, but leave the mind awake, aware, untouched? Then, monsieur, the punishment becomes eternal. Jean-Luc jerks against the chains, panic flooding his chest. No, he gasps. Whatever this is. The doctor's gloved finger presses gently to his lips. Shh. Breathe. The Republic demands not your blood, but your endurance. The guards step forward, gripping Jean-Luc's arms to hold him steady. His heart thrashes wildly in his chest as the needle slides into the soft flesh of his neck. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the cold begins to spread. It starts in his throat, a creeping frost that moves downward, numbing his chest, his stomach, his legs. He tries to move, but his limbs respond sluggishly, as though they belong to someone else. His breathing slows. His heartbeat echoes in his ears, deep and hollow. Good, the doctor murmurs, checking his pulse. You can still hear me. That means the mind remains intact. Jean-Luc's tongue feels like lead. He tries to form words, but his mouth won't obey. His jaw is locked. His lips hang slightly parted, but nothing moves. The doctor's tone becomes almost reverent, his eyes bright behind the mask. This is the beginning of what we call conscious suspension, a state where the brain endures, though the body forgets how to be alive. Jean-Luc's fingers twitch weakly, but even that motion soon fades. He can feel the iron beneath his wrists, the damp air on his skin. But his body no longer listens. He is aware, horribly aware, but utterly powerless. He wants to scream. He wants to beg. But his lungs will not draw enough air. His body has become a coffin, and he is being buried within it, inch by inch. The doctor circles him slowly, the heels of his boots scraping the stone. Your senses remain sharp, he says softly. Sight, hearing, touch. You will experience them all, but you will not move. You will not cry out. You will not die. He steps closer and holds up a small metal rod over the nearby brazier. The tip glows orange. This, the doctor continues, is how we measure consciousness. The rod hisses as he draws it from the fire. Jean-Luc's eyes widen, his breath caught halfway in his chest. He cannot move, cannot plead. He can only wait. The doctor lowers the glowing iron toward his hand. Slowly, almost lovingly. The heat touches his skin, and suddenly the world is nothing but agony. His nerves ignite, his skin sears. The pain is total, absolute, but his body remains still. Not a scream, not a twitch, not even a blink. His face is frozen in silence while his mind howls in terror. Inside his skull, he's screaming so loud he feels his thoughts shaking apart. The smell of burned flesh fills the chamber. The guards shift uneasily. One looks away. The doctor does not. He watches the smoke rise from Jean-Luc's hand with fascination. Remarkable, he whispers. Total paralysis. Full sensory retention. He scribbles something into a small notebook resting on a nearby table. Jean-Luc's vision blurs with tears that cannot fall. His body trembles only in his mind, a phantom motion, a ghostly rebellion. The doctor returns to his side. You feel it, he says, not as a question, but as a statement. I can see it in your pupils, the dilation, the tremor. He leans closer, voice low, almost intimate. You're screaming inside, aren't you? Jean-Luc's heart slams against his ribs, but his mouth is silent. His eyes dart wildly, pleading, the only part of him that still moves. The doctor nods, satisfied. Perfect. He withdraws the iron, places it back into the brazier, and stands upright. Your body will no longer obey the mind, he says softly, but your mind will obey me. He takes a step back, turning to the guards. Leave him. He must learn the language of stillness. The guards hesitate. Even they look uneasy now. One mutters, "He's still burning." "Good," the doctor replies coldly. "Let him remember it." The door creaks open. Their boots fade into the distance. The chamber grows silent again, except for the soft crackle of the fire and the faint, irregular sound of Jean-Luc's breathing. His eyes dart toward the wall. The carvings are still there, names half-faded, messages etched by others who came before him. He wants to cry, to close his eyes, but even that is denied. His gaze remains fixed on the flickering flame, his thoughts swirling into panic and despair. Somewhere deep inside, a realization begins to take root. He is not dying. He will not die. He will feel everything. And as the silence closes in, Jean-Luc understands the truth of the words he saw scratched into the dirt. They make you watch yourself die. There is no such thing as mourning anymore. No light, no darkness. Only a thick, unbroken fog that hums behind Jean-Luc's eyes. The sound of his own mind turning in endless circles. He can't move. He can't sleep. He can't even blink. But he knows he's still alive because the pain still comes. Sometimes it's a burn crawling up his arm, sometimes a needle pressing into the soft flesh of his neck. Sometimes it's nothing, and that's worse. The silence between the tortures stretches like an ocean with no shore. He tries to count seconds, then minutes, then hours. But time slips. It melts. He loses the pattern. He loses everything. The room, if it's still a room, no longer exists in his mind. He floats somewhere between memory and fever. And then he starts to see her. His wife. Her face blooms from the dark like candlelight underwater. Her hair is damp, her eyes wet with pity. "Jean-Luc," she whispers, her voice echoing from nowhere. "It's over now. You can rest." He tries to reach her, but his arms don't move. His lips remain parted, still frozen in that half-breath of fear. "I'm here," she says. "You've suffered enough." But the words ripple strangely. The voice breaks, repeats, distorts. "I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." It's not her. It's something wearing her voice. He realizes the sound isn't in the air. It's inside his skull. Something crawling through the cracks of his thoughts, mimicking the only thing he still loves. And then there are others. Whispers, hundreds of them, slithering through the dark. Old men, children, women gasping, laughing, crying. A chorus of souls that never left the catacombs beneath Paris. Prisoners of thought, just like him. They chant things he cannot understand. Latin, French, something older. He feels them moving inside him, like shadows learning how to breathe. Sometimes they scream. Sometimes they pray, and sometimes they just whisper one word: stay. The doctors still come. He knows it. He feels the vibrations through the ground when their boots strike the stone. He feels the tubes shift in his veins, the liquid sliding into him, cold as death. He hears voices above him, faint, distorted through walls and wires. Neuronal activity, still conscious, week 5. Week 5. That word bites through the fog like a knife. 5 weeks. He's been here 5 weeks. His mind starts to convulse against itself, clawing for escape. He thinks of the streets of Paris, of sunlight breaking through cathedral glass, of the scent of bread from the marketplace, of rain hitting rooftops. He thinks of his wife's laughter, his child's small hand in his own. But even those memories begin to curdle, folding in on themselves like burning paper. The hallucinations grow bolder. He sees the guillotine, tall and gleaming, descending again and again, each fall slicing through the black air with a sharp metallic sigh. Each time, the blade stops inches from his throat, trembling there like a threat that never ends. Sometimes he hears the doctor's voice blending with the whispers. "You are the threshold, Jean-Luc. The boundary between flesh and soul." He laughs, a dry, broken laugh that exists only in his head, the boundary between flesh and soul. That's what he's become. A living experiment. They've trapped his consciousness in a body that should no longer function, just to see how long the mind will cling to what's left. He understands now. The wires, the injections, the strange devices pressing against his skull. They're not just feeding him, they're listening, recording every flicker of his thoughts, every image, every fear, every last spark of being. He imagines them in another room, watching patterns of light move across a glass screen as his brain fights to stay alive. They are documenting the slow decay of a soul. And the worst part is, he can feel it happening. Each day, a little more of him dissolves into the static. His memories blur. His wife's voice fades. He begins to forget his own name, his own face, his reason for resisting. He becomes a rhythm, a pulse, a ghost made of thought. A consciousness echoing through the wires, drifting between the living and the dead. Sometimes he thinks he hears the doctor whisper again close to his ear. "You see, Monsieur Moreau, death is not an ending. It is merely an observation." And in that moment, something inside him finally breaks. He stops trying to fight, stops trying to move. Even the screaming in his mind becomes quiet. What remains is something calm, cold, infinite. He floats there, a single thought left in a body that has forgotten how to die. And in that terrible silence, Jean-Luc realizes the experiment was never about how long the mind can survive. It was about when the soul finally gives up. The years have turned the revolution to dust. The banners once soaked in blood now hang faded and forgotten. The shouts of mobs that once shook the streets of Paris have long fallen silent. The terror has devoured itself, and in the ruins it left behind, among broken ideals and rusted machines, something still breathes. A young doctor walks through the forgotten wing of an abandoned facility. The doors are sealed with rot. The walls hum faintly, as if the air itself remembers the screams once trapped inside. He carries a lantern, its trembling light slicing through the dark like a blade. He's been sent to dismantle the old instruments of fear, to erase the last traces of the committee's horrors. But as he walks deeper, the air changes. He feels it, a coldness that isn't just temperature but presence. Something watching. He finds a door marked with a symbol he's never seen before. Half revolutionary seal, half medical insignia. He pries it open. The smell of metal and decay floods out, and there, in the center of the room, lies a shape. Jean-Luc Moreau, or what's left of him. His skin is paper, his body, little more than a skeleton threaded with old wires and tubes. Yet the eyes, those hollow gray eyes, are open, fixed on the ceiling, unmoving, unblinking. The doctor steps closer, trembling. He expects death, a corpse. But then he sees it. The faintest flicker of movement in the monitor beside the bed. A pulse, a signal, brain activity. For a long, unbearable silence, the young doctor just stares. Then he whispers, voice breaking, "My God, you're still here." He looks at the files scattered around the chamber, yellowed, ink faded but legible. He feels sick. They had left him here, not for days, not for months, for years, kept alive in a body that had stopped living. A prisoner of the mind. The doctor falls to his knees beside the table, tears burning down his face. He leans in close, whispering to the figure that no longer looks human. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know they still had you." He checks the machines, ancient and failing, humming on the edge of collapse. Jean-Luc's heart barely stirs beneath his chest, but the mind, it's still awake. He can't hear, but he knows. He feels the warmth of a human voice again, after decades of silence. And in that moment, that small mercy of being spoken to, a tear, or perhaps a faint shimmer of moisture, forms at the corner of his still open eye. The doctor understands. He can't leave him like this. He reaches for a vial in his satchel, a clear liquid, quick and merciful. He hesitates, staring at the needle, then at Jean-Luc's unblinking face. He whispers, "It's over now. You can rest." He slides the needle into the fragile vein, presses the plunger slowly. For a heartbeat, nothing changes. Then, something does. Inside Jean-Luc's mind, the endless dark begins to thin. The fog that has bound him for years starts to fade, and in that vast silence, he sees it. The guillotine, tall, gleaming, suspended above him once more. But this time he does not fear it. He welcomes it. He hears the faint whisper of a blade cutting through the air, clean, final, almost merciful. And for the first time in decades, he smiles. The blade falls. The machines go silent. The room grows still. The doctor lowers his head, whispering a quiet prayer over the lifeless body. Though he knows no prayer could ever wash away what had been done here, outside the first light of dawn spills into the ruins. The revolution's ghosts fade with it. And somewhere, beyond pain, beyond memory, Jean-Luc Moreau finally dies. Not as a prisoner, not as an experiment, but as a man who had been denied death. And at last, found it. The punishment worse than the guillotine had finally ended. The air beneath Paris hasn't changed in centuries. It's thick with dust, silence, and the scent of old bones. A team of construction workers, faces lit by the flicker of industrial lamps, chip through a forgotten wall while expanding a section of the metro. The foreman grumbles about delays, the hum of drills echoing through narrow tunnels that have swallowed men before. Then, the wall gives way. A hollow space yawns open behind it, sealed in darkness for more than 200 years. Must be another catacomb section, one worker mutters. But the air that spills out isn't like the rest of the tunnels. It's colder, heavier, almost watching. They push inside, brushing away cobwebs, illuminating what looks like a small chamber. Stone walls, cracked with age, cables long turned to dust. And at its center sits a chair. Not an ordinary chair, but one made of iron and wood, fused with old straps, restraints, and rusted tubes running from the armrests into the floor. And in it, still bound upright, is a skeleton. Its jaw hangs slightly open, the skull tilted as if mid-breath. One hand is clenched tight around a rotted scrap of paper, the other still fixed to a rusted metal shackle. The workers fall silent. One of them turns off his flashlight, as if afraid to disturb whatever presence lingers there. Jesus, what the hell is this place? An archaeologist is called. Then the police. Then historians. They arrive with gloves, cameras, reverent silence. When they pry the scrap of paper from the skeletal hand, it disintegrates. But beneath the chair, buried in dust and mold, they find a notebook. The pages are fragile, but the ink, though faded, still bleeds through in ghostly lines. A doctor's handwriting. Entry 712. Subject remains conscious. Neural activity continuous despite complete paralysis. He never stopped dreaming. The room grows colder as they read. Someone swears they hear faint whispers, though there's no wind, no air movement at all. The lights flicker. A hum stirs from somewhere deep in the stone, like a heartbeat remembering itself. The lead researcher closes the book, voice barely a whisper. This isn't just a burial site, she says. This was a laboratory. They photograph everything. The chair, the skeleton, the decayed instruments, before sealing the chamber again. But one worker swears that, as they left, he heard a faint sound from behind the wall. A breath. A sigh. Or maybe, just maybe, the whisper of a man still dreaming. The camera lingers on the empty hallway. Dust drifts through the beam of a flickering light. Somewhere in the dark, metal creaks, soft, slow, deliberate. Then, cut to black. A single line fades onto the screen. He never stopped dreaming. And beneath it, in stark white letters, the punishment worse than the guillotine. The sound fades, leaving only silence, the kind that feels alive.